And we are live. Hello, everyone. We're back again. I know you thought that after 7 hours of live streaming yesterday, you'd have a break, but no. Me and Matt said no. It's Friday. We're going live. Again, welcome back to This Week at Work, where we bring you the latest training news on organizations, technology, and the future of work. I'm Chris Rainey. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Matt Burns. How are you doing, my friend?
I don't think the week is complete until we do this live stream. So I'm happy to be here.
People are not allowed to leave. They can't. You're not allowed to turn off for the weekend until you watch our show. That's the rule. I was going to say happy moving day, Matt, because you're moving, aren't you? But is it happy? Are moving days ever happy, or are they just stressful?
It's just stressful. I'm excited about the move.
Where are you going?
I'm just not excited about moving. I'm moving to Ottawa.
Nice.
Yeah.
I nodded as if I have any idea how far that is from where you are. So how far is that?
I'm moving closer to you.
Oh, in what set? No, but how far is that from where you are now?
4,500 kilometers east.
Oh, wow. So when you say you're moving, you're moving.
I'm moving.
In London, when we say we're moving, it's like half an hour away. You're like, it's a different level of moving.
Well, offline, Bruno and I were trying to figure out how long where you'd actually get if you did the same driving distance from London. And I got to Istanbul and I still had time to go. So that's just how far I'm traveling from Vancouver to Toronto. It's a significant, Ottawa, that's a significant drive. And I'm closer to you.
Oh, that's all that matters. So hopefully you still have a good internet connection. That's the main thing. As long as you're good internet, we're all good. All right. So as you've probably seen by the title, everyone, we're talking about, what are we talking about, Matt, today?
PowerSkills?
PowerSkills. We were saying offline jokingly, but I'm going to say it anyway. Our PowerSkills, soft skills rewrapped.
Oh, you took my joke. That's not fair. Yes. And Josh Bersin, who penned the article, we've known Josh for years. Josh does a great job of wrapping abstract and opaque concepts and making them relatable. It's one of the things I admire about him.
Same.
He's done a really nice job here of wrapping what he calls power skills, which, as you've alluded to, are really just a repackaging of soft skills, and makes a really compelling case that power skills really are the path forward for organizations, and that the connotation of them being soft implies that they're just not valued or that they're not business oriented. And I think that he does a really nice job of presenting the business case for some of these skills. Some examples, Chris, he includes some surveys and some research studies that point to, for example, IBM believing that the majority of skills that are important moving forward are all what traditionally would be referred to as soft skills, but as Josh refers to as power skills. The fact is, as the world changes and the world of work shifts, technical skills are quickly becoming automated and replaced by technology and data and AI. And those traditional soft skills, now power skills, are the differentiators for organizations that are operating in a dispersed way, empowered by technology. So it's a really timely article. I think he's hit the nail on the head, and I think it's a good chat for today.
100%. And for those that, firstly, Bruno, make sure you leave a link in the comments for everyone to the article in the chat. Well, you can say there's already a question. Is that what you're about to say?
Yeah, there is also already a question.
Already a question.
Wow.
Is
it Josh?
No, it's Baz.
Baz again.
Yeah. He's a fan.
Baz, are you employed? I just want to know. Be honest, Baz, in the chat. Do you have a job? Because I feel like you're just sitting there waiting for our live streams. I love Baz. What's this question?
What recommendations do you have for measuring these non-technical skills, especially from a progress perspective?
Oh. I'm gonna have to
this is why I don't know if we can let Baz in anymore. He always asks tough questions.
Can we just to ban him?
He's definitely not paid by us. He's paid by somebody else. That's very clear.
He says he's working from home.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. What you don't realize, he's actually a bot. Baz is a bot.
Oh.
Baz bot. So he just.
Should we stop stalling and answer his question?
Yeah, sure. Go for answer his question.
Yeah, you should answer his question. Here's the thing. it's really hard to do that, because in a lot of cases, we're talking about measuring things that are not measurable. Here's my approach, and here's how I've taken, and this is probably half of the answer. So I apologize, Baz, in the audience. I would welcome additional feedback in the chat regarding suggestions. I start from a place of measuring outputs. So when I work with my team members, we establish goals, we establish deliverables, and we establish outputs. There's an assumption that there are a number of activities and skills and competencies that are required to achieve a lot of those goals. And I'm very thoughtful about pairing task and assignment to certain individuals in a way that I think would allow them to stretch or prove or test or develop certain skill sets. I'll give you an example. I had a team member previously who really struggled with public speaking. And that was a real fear of theirs. They'd struggled with it throughout their entire professional career, in college, university, in high school, all the way back. Public speaking for them was a real barrier. And this person wanted to become an HR business partner, where they'd be regularly called upon to present ideas to multiple levels of the organization, and would be asked to support multiple levels of the organization. And in that case, what we did was position them to present at a quarterly meeting that we'd host. We worked on their script together, we worked on the presentation together, we did mock runs together and prep, and got to a place where they felt comfortable in developing those soft skills, presentation, empathy, communication, executive presence, like all those items. And it was a more iterative coaching method. I haven't at this point developed a really good method of quantifiable improvement. For me, it's a lot of hands-on coaching, hands-on development. Now, I appreciate that in a lot of cases that may not be possible. You might be in different locations, but that development, that hands-on support can also occur peer-to-peer. And what we're seeing a lot more of now in this post-pandemic world is peer-to-peer development, peer-to-peer training, where you're assigning somebody a buddy when they start, or orientation partner when they begin a new role. And they have that support from somebody on the team that can help facilitate some of the activities, but also address some of the power skills that need to be in the role to make them successful. So that's how I have developed it. How I measure it ultimately is through outputs, and ultimately through those pieces. Where I wanted to get to, but I never got to, Chris, before I left the corporate world, was to really develop a work with a technology that would allow us to quantify some of these skills.
Yeah, you can do it through pulse surveys, for example.
Sure, yeah, pre-survey, post-survey, but I'm mindful of the fact that the majority of those surveys are often self-reported, which is not the most accurate method of determining progress. I mean, if somebody says they're more comfortable, more confident, more competent, that it does account for something. But I think Baz is asking a more quantifiable question. So I think the answer is to develop those measures and metrics upfront, assess them, undertake a bunch of training and development experiences, reassess in the back end. If individuals are aware of tools that help us achieve this, I'm looking at like ATS platforms, LMS platforms. It's actually a great question, Chris, for Chris Lind, our friend, like our friend who's learning technology.
I was thinking that because learning's quite an easier one to measure. I was looking at the list, if you could bring them up actually, Bruno, the list of skills that are shared in the article by Josh. Some of them actually really surprised me, like tenacity, joy. That one I wasn't expecting.
I saw Joy spin up a few different posts I saw on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Ethics.
Go on.
Ethics,
yeah. Followership, which is one that I haven't really come up often. But I think learning's an easier one to measure. We've kind of been working on that for a while now. I think everyone kind of listening probably knows that one. But how do you develop a culture of curiosity? You have to kind of embed that in every element of the organization. There's companies out there that link curiosity directly to people's bonuses, and have you actually failed forward? Actually, that's now seen as a positive in companies, that you've made a mistake and tried something and not succeeded, because you're actually developing that culture of curiosity, and you can actually measure that as well. So it's really, really interesting.
Well, and I think, so you hit on a key point. This requires intentionality.
Yes.
So this requires organizations to be thoughtful about the competencies and the power skills that they want embedded into their organization.
And then work from there.
And I think a good starting point is to start with Josh's list and identify which are your key drivers, your key differentiators, and depending on your industry and life stage and life stage of the company, et cetera, those might evolve and shift. I want to go back to Baz's question though, because he always asks good ones. We're talking about measurement here. So the reason I reference Chris Lind is because a lot of competency skills can now be measured in a way they weren't back when I was administering assessments, back when I was working in a learning and development kind of leadership role. It was very much, asynchronous, recorded, compliance focused e-learning.
Yeah.
And learning experience and knowledge retention, frankly, wasn't the goal. It was, how do we check the box to prove we've hit this compliance piece? And it was for legal purposes and compliance purposes. Now there's definitely a move and a shift to how do we use technology in a method of actually teaching people, engaging them, inspiring them. And that occurs specifically in a hybrid work setting where we now have people who may often never see their coworkers or may actually never go to the office at all. So there definitely has been maturity on this. I would ask Baz as patience as we go and maybe do some offline asking of our friends and maybe come back, Chris, in the future, want to provide a bit more of a wholesome update.
We'll get Josh
in.
We'll get Josh back.
Let's get Josh in. Let's get Dave Ulrich in, if that matters as well. Let's get some people in that can add some perspective here. But I think ultimately it comes down to intentionality, establishing your measures and metrics, and then following up on the other end. The tools that we use, there's still a question mark for me on that.
We've got an interesting reflection from Roxine, who says that the skills predominantly considered as effeminate are now being considered power skills. I'm loving this paradigm shift. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? All the things in the past that were seen as fluffy and now the skills that really matter when you talk about leading with empathy. That wouldn't even been in the list a few years ago, which is now one of the most critical skills, I believe, for leaders as well. So it's actually incredible. It's been a really good shift back to the human and the heart.
Totally.
As well. And I think as you said earlier, Matt, the more and more a lot of these technical routines become automated and the more the technology advances, the more important that these skills are going to be as well. But I think at the same time, companies are having to completely reshape their organizations and retrain their leaders. And how leaders are now measured is going to have to change. If you want these outcomes, you're going to have to change that as well.
Well, you think about how fundamentally the employment relationship has changed just in our lifetimes, Chris. Like I remember an era where most of my contemporaries were baby boomers, where there was definitely a culture of you don't ask questions. We'll tell you when you need to know the information.
Yeah.
Information was wielded as power, as influence, as authority. And a lot of those factors have shifted. Information has now been democratized. Sometimes our direct reports have more information than we do. A lot of times our customers have more information than we do. And we have to, as an organization, expect and understand that when the fundamental features of work change, we're no longer in the same office together. We no longer get the benefits of co-location. We may have additional complexities where people are managing multiple things in addition to their jobs. There are factors that go above and beyond what traditionally would have been kind of a work context where you pretty much gave your life to your employer. There really wasn't any questions asked. The concept of work-life balance was kind of a fallacy. Like a lot has changed in the last 15 to 20 years. And it would stand to reason that some of those leadership attributes are still lingering from the old days. And there's a bit of a rebranding and a shift that has to occur as new generation leadership on the middle, and that what that is important in the 21st century when you're within a knowledge-based economy where people do have choice, where the demographics are such that every single day it's going to be harder and harder to find key talent as demographics continue to evolve into more of an aging workforce. We no longer have the luxury as employers, as leaders, as entrepreneurs to draw a hard line and take a adversarial approach against our employees, as may have been acceptable when the Industrial Revolution came to be and we were factory owners and working with people on the line who were producing widgets. The world has shifted, and if we are as employers, as organizations, as leaders, want the full contributions of our team members, we have to meet them where they're at. That's not weakness. That's just treating people with human respect. So I echo the comments. This is a wonderful transition, and I think we can continue to move down this path. I want to work in an organization and with people that care about me.
Yeah.
I want to care about other people, and those things don't have to conflict with business results.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I always thought was really cool from the article as well is the graph. I don't know if you have it, Bruno, to bring up of the young workers are very hungry for these behavioral skills as well. Which was you surprised by that or not so much?
Not at all. Early in my career, I was certainly a sponge for information when it came to how to show up, how to interact, how to make sense, and how to have success, frankly, in an environment that was foreign to me. when you go into big organizations or even just a company for the first time, it's a big change from somebody who has maybe only worked part-time jobs or in retail positions or gone to school for the majority of it. There is an element of integration that occurs in any organization, and a lot of the success of this integration depends on these power skills. Chris, I've worked predominantly in human resources where as along with the majority of people watching this podcast, we never really get to wield any authority or power, which is probably good. Instead, we lead through influence. We work with our stakeholders. Yeah. We guide, we encourage, we inform. That is much more difficult than putting my foot down saying, this is the way that it has to be. That's a very easy style of management with very good short-term benefits and works really well in crisis or for a fire drill. But in the world that we are living today, we need to take our time. We need to be more nuanced. We need to be more thoughtful. I'm not surprised the latest generation of employees is looking for this. One, because they themselves are craving it as the individual perspective, but they also understand that to lead their peers and to lead in the future, they're going to need to have these skills. So that doesn't surprise me. What is interesting is, do you feel, Chris, that the generations that came before them are well equipped to teach them those skills? That's a very different thing altogether.
I would say, unfortunately, I'd say no as well.
Blind leading the blind, right?
Yeah, it's also so ingrained. Like I still remember the story of my leader bringing me in a meeting saying, why are you spending time with your team outside the business? You're the manager and you're not their friend.
Right.
And I was so confused. I was like, wait a minute, I'll spend half of my life with these, more than half of my life with these. You're telling me not to build relationships, not to build friendships? And they're like, no, Chris, you're their manager. You're not their friend. This is why you're having issues. And I was like, no, this is why we're thriving. Because they can come to me. Right. They can open up when they're not feeling well. They can be vulnerable. I can be vulnerable with them and then not see that as weakness. But that was kind of battered out of me, unfortunately, as a leader as well. So I think no. Unfortunately, the answer is no. And we saw that during the pandemic when there was so and still even now with challenges around mental health and well-being, where leaders are really struggling to have those conversations because they just weren't prepared. They didn't even have the common language to even open up those type of conversations. So these are fundamental skills that companies need to be working with their leaders on and training them on. And it's not their fault, by the way. No, this is no bash on managers or leaders. They've had so much to deal with over the last couple of years. And whilst trying to take care of themselves at the same time, it's tough to be a leader now.
One thing I've heard a lot, and that's a story that you've heard, I know, during this pandemic, Chris, and I can speak from personal experience, that in addition to all the professional changes that have gone on for me over the last 3 years during the pandemic, in parallel, there's been a lot of personal transformation that's occurred, partly by design and partly because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I've had to learn a lot about myself, and I would have considered myself going into the last 3 years to be a relatively emotionally intelligent person when you look at the average workforce. That being said, I did not have a really good way of, for example, understanding how to manage my own stress. I was notorious for taking on the stress of other people, my team members, the organization. Insane. I was always putting myself in the line of fire of conflict to collaborate, because I always felt that I would add value in those more challenging moments, but I would ingest a lot of that energy, a lot of that stress, a lot of that just challenging emotions. And I didn't have a really good way of dealing with that. So I oftentimes would find myself oscillating between really doing really well and then being burned out. So trying to figure out how I would be able to manage that without having to curtail some of the activities and some of the value that I provide in the organization. I don't want to shy away from tough conversations. I don't want to be unavailable to my colleagues when they need support because I'm overwhelmed with my own stuff and a combination of other things. So I do agree with you. I think managers are, in a lot of cases, learning on the fly, and they're learning skills that we were not taught in school, in some cases growing up, in some cases in our friend groups, or we haven't done the work on the side with therapy or friends and colleagues. Like, we're very much trying to build these skills while we're operating businesses, while we're trying to meet our obligations to our teams, while we're trying to earn a living in an environment where inflation is rising and job loss is a real thing. It's a lot for people to say, hey, you know what? On top of all that, we need you to change who you are as a person in some ways. Like that's a lot of work. And it, frankly, Chris, I'll be honest, from personally, it's really hard work. You have to go back and challenge some really deeply held assumptions. You have to poke into some traumas that may go back as far as childhood.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff that comes up, people. And that comes for your employees as well. You talk about building that friendship with your team members, Chris. By building that collegial relationship that facilitates open and honest communication, you create an environment where your team members can come to you for support, where they can come to you for guidance, where they can come to you to be redirected to more qualified practitioners, which in most cases should lead to improved performance on their part, improved satisfaction on their part, improved loyalty on their part, which ultimately is the role of a leader. How do we facilitate the success of our team members? That's the role of a leader. And that's where we're starting to shift. But I understand that we have a long way to go in some cases. So it's about finding those external resources that you can pair with. It's about finding that support network. It's about finding that networking group. It's about finding, in some cases, that therapist to help through some of these things. I promise you two things. The first one is it's going to be really, really hard. And the second one is it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
And I can speak from personal experience on both accounts.
And I can resonate with everything. I think everyone listening probably can resonate with a lot of what you said. I think early on, I had to, especially during the last 2 years, I had to realize that I need to take care of Chris first. You know, I can't be having conversations with my team when I'm deep down behind. I'm thinking to myself, I'm a hypocrite. I'm giving advice to you and trying to have these conversations around these particular topics, but here I am suffering myself and not even having those conversations. As well,
or even just showing up in an emotionally regulated way.
Yeah,
like just, you know, you've had a stressful day at home, you've had a stressful day with XYZ, and now you have to perform. We have to go on a live stream, you have to host a conference, we have to deal with a key client, we have to deal with a team member who needs our support. Sometimes it can be really hard to show up as a leader when you're not feeling 100% like you need to feel. And I think that's something that we don't often talk about. There's an expectation of you just need to be ready, need to be on, need to be operating 100% all the time. And that's just not practical. But if we don't create a culture where that's not acceptable, here's what happens, Chris. People hide it. It's still happening, but people end up hiding it. They end up not getting support. They end up having a lot more shame. They end up not getting the things that they need and the relationship they can build with their team and with you. And that ultimately does everyone a disservice.
Yeah. My team called me out on that as well, actually, at a certain point where they were like, Chris, we don't know what Chris we're going to get today. We don't know if we're going to get the super energized Chris today, or we're going to get the Chris who just comes in quiet and sits down. And it's very obvious that that was the day that I was suffering, right? Where I feel a bit anxious, a bit overwhelmed. But rather than talking with the team saying, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed today, going to need a little bit of support, I would just hide it, thinking I'm doing them a service. But opposite, complete opposite effect. But now I can just vice versa. And again, coming back to all these are all power skills, right? And coming back to the team and just and again, patience, humility, you know, teamwork. These are all things that now we can collaborate on because we're open and we have create that culture of psychological safety where we can operate and have that's where another one of the skills, joy. It brings joy in the workplace when you have that type of environment.
We got a few people talking about kind of the adoption of soft skills. So obviously Baz says, unlike technical skills, you don't kind of tend to see upskilling with soft skills. And then Andrew is asking, how can you measure soft/power skill adoption? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
That's a tough one.
We're getting back to the same challenge. And this is part of the reason why it's been so difficult and intangible, is because we have a difficult time in assessing progress in these areas. Yeah. Here's a couple of things that I've seen. I'm not suggesting that they are the be all and end all, but there are organizations that, for example, do in cases encourage their employees to self-report on how they're feeling today. 5-point scale. How are you feeling from 1 to 5? And that could be a measure over a longer period of time of a trend of, you know, where things are going. And when those numbers are aggregated, can give organizations, when you remove the unique identifiers, an opportunity to see the pulse of the organization. Chris, you just did a conference yesterday with your friends at Visier, do a great job of consolidating, aggregating information at the macro in an organization to inform leadership behaviors. It's about identifying those measures and metrics to extract. And then what do you do with the information?
I have an example,
depending on the soft skills.
I have an example, actually. So one of the guests yesterday mentioned that on their landing page, their sort of intranet that they have, They have a, you know, like when you go into, it's like a hospital typically where you have like all the faces and you click, click where you're feeling happy or sad, etc. They made a digital version on their landing pages. So whenever their employees log in for the day, they could just hit the button to say how they're feeling. And they also had a physical one in the workplace. So they could actually measure how people are feeling in the workplace versus remotely. And then now they've got this rich data that they've got versus like, and also location. So now they actually can see location, what the sentiment analysis is, and then virtual versus physical. And that was a very simple way of doing it. And their chief diversity officer was saying it led to some incredible work that they've been doing across different regions and populations based on that. So that's a very simple one that they just got on the phone with their IT team and said, hey, can we just throw that up there and create that? So, yeah. All right, Matt, I think we're at the end of the day, and I think your removal van's about to roll up soon.
It's going to leave without me if I don't go here.
Yeah, I know. So the next time we see you, you're going to be in another place.
Yeah, I don't know where.
Another background.
But, I don't know where yet, but I'll be somewhere traveling across Canada.
Nice.
So you're going to come in live from like the top of a mountain somewhere or something like that?
Yeah, or a hockey rink or something.
Can you find a moose for me? I've never seen one.
Maybe I'll do it riding a Zamboni.
A Zamboni. Do you reckon our audience know what the Zamboni is? They probably don't. Or actually, maybe on your side they will. A Zamboni, for everyone, is the thing that cleans the ice and lays a new layer of ice on top, the thing that drives around.
It's a Canadian limousine.
Canadian limousine, yeah, exactly. Well, look, thanks for tuning in, everyone. As always, we appreciate all of you, and thank you, Baz, for tuning in. As always, if I turn up one day and Baz doesn't ask a question, I'm gonna have to send out a search party. I'll be like, something's wrong. The internet's crashed. Something's going wrong. But Baz, we should get Baz on the show.
We should get Baz on the show.
Baz, let us know if you want to come on the show. You're like, I need to know if you're real and see you in the flesh. A hologram just going to appear on the show as well. But thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you all, as always. Matt, congratulations on the move. And enjoy it when you get there, because I know how it is when you're moving as well. And for everyone else, have an amazing weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.